Ladies and gentlemen, I will call this meeting to order. The Utah Board of Water Resources. We're meeting today at 1450 South Hilton Drive, St. George, Utah, in the Cherokee room of the Crystal Inn. In attendance are all board members with the exception of Mr. Randy Crozier, who's been excused as his wife has broken her arm and is having surgery today. And so we excuse Randy for today's board meeting. One quick comment, I'd like to thank Washington County Water Conservancy for entertaining the Board of Water Resources Monday night. And it was interesting, the comments were made by Director Millis and General Manager Ron Thompson of the Washington County Water Conservancy District. With that, we have...
That's a project.
Oh, that's a project, okay. All right. We have guests here today, Mr. David Hardvigson of Smith Hardvigson, attorney, Mr. John Atkinson of Sunrise Engineering, Mr. Brett Reynolds of Civco Engineering Incorporated, Mr. Ken Adams is with us today, Mr. Kent Jones, State Engineer, is with us today, and we welcome all the rest of you who are with us today. With that, our first agenda item are the approval of the minutes of the February 8th, 2018 General Board meeting, and I'd be prepared to hear a motion to approve the minutes of the February 8th, 2018 meeting. Motion by Steve and a second by Norm. Any discussion on the minutes? If not, all in favor of approving the February 8th minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next agenda item is the water supply report, and I believe I saw Troy Roston in the room. Oh yeah, well, it's pretty obvious back there. And so Troy, we will turn the time to you. Most of us heard your glowing report yesterday, and I hope it's improved a lot since yesterday.
Somewhat. It's getting there.
So is your face friendlier today?
Yes, it is, actually. It's direct relation to the snowpack. So I've been grumpy for about 5 out of 6 years. Okay, so most of you have seen this talk, so we'll run through the slides. I did update all the suite charts with projection graphs on it, so that's up to date to today. So as you all know, Randy retired. It was just a year ago here. I remember sitting here and watching him give his last talk to you here, and you inquired who was going to take over to him, and he pointed to me, and I made myself as small as possible. And so here we are. And so he wanted to retire so he could spend more time with his children. About the last 2 months before he retired, he went out and bought that new truck and a new Commander there. And of course, he's got his fleet of snowmobiles that he maintains and wrecks. So Randy stops by now and again. We did this in one take. we had many discussions about what he would do when he retired, and one of them was that he would sit in the corner of the office and throw stuff at me. We were going to go spitballs, but. So I think his bishop duty is just about done now. He's got about a year and a half, and so I anticipate that he will be bearded again after that. Okay, so water year 2018. As you all know, East Coast got a pretty good snowstorms. They got most of the snow that we didn't. Even Montana did really well. A lot of the snow went north of us into Montana and down and over on the East Coast, and even Texas got some snow. So in Utah, it felt sometimes that we hardly had any snow, and actually that is true. It started out really abysmal. So December 1st, we usually have some snow up in the high elevation sites. But as you can see from this graph, this is December 1st, we had virtually nothing down south. A lot of the basins had absolutely no snow at all, and started to accumulate a little bit there on the north end, mainly in the northeastern Uintas and the Bear. And then January 1, we're in the teens down south, and we're hovering about average in the north and a little above average in the Bear. And this was the point where Randy wrote his last report and said the snowpack was below abysmal. And at that time, I was pretty nervous. We were talking about being as bad as 1977, and 77 was a really, really lack of snowpack year, and we were concerned that it might turn out that way. But as the season progressed, January we did receive some storms, and it improved. The colors don't look any different, but the numbers are actually much more improved, especially down south. So where we were in the teens, and Beaver River was at 6%. It's now 29, and a lot of the basins are approaching at least half the snowpack is what they usually have, and the north is about half at that time. And then March 1 again, we're improving a little bit more. So the south is more at about 50%, and the north is more or less at 50%. Again, only two basins that really were doing reasonably well and still are is the Bear River and the Uintas, eastern Uintas, and that's primarily because of the snow pattern. The weather pattern has been clipping the top of Utah, and so both the Bear and northeast Uintas have been benefiting from that pattern to some. Now this is as of today. As you can see, all the red went away, and we're now in the 60% range. And so we are seeing some improvement, and the projection out for the next 48 hours, we got a nice storm coming through, and I anticipate that will bump up our percent average as well. And potentially there's another storm tracking after that. So the end of March here could actually really put a lot of the basins potentially to high 60s, maybe even 70%, which still is an average, but it's a lot better than half the snowpack. So when we look at the basins individually, we'll start at the Bear and work our way south. You've all seen these projection graphs, and I want to point this out as well, that these projection graphs are on our website, and you can click on those to the right there. You can click on the years, and the year of that snowpack will overlay on top of the graph, and then you can turn on and off to 50%, to 30%, to 9%, and so you don't have all those wiggly lines. You can turn on and off, and it'll be more. It's a little clearer, and so that's helpful. We use these graphs a lot. I know a lot of you probably look at them as well. So currently, as you can see, the Bear is at 78%, and that percent of normal peak is 73%. So we have achieved 73% of what the percent normal peak is at. And then the days until peak, we have 13 days until the 30-year normal peak. And then percentile rank for these graphs are based on strictly on just SNOTEL records, and so it only goes back to 1978. So we're looking at about 40 years, and so that percentile rank is a normal average over 100. So when we dig in a little closer, we look at this graph here is interesting, and the southern ones are more interesting, where this shows you what the normal SWE accumulation is by month. So for the Bear, January is usually the biggest SWE accumulation month in the winter period. And then, so we can see October was, you don't have much in October regardless. November, actually the Bear was doing pretty well. And then it started losing ground December, January, February. March, I anticipate that we'll probably hit that normal monthly SWE accumulation and might exceed it a little bit. But there's still December, January, February where we're trying to make ground from the lack of SWE from normal there, and so that's why we're at about 78%. So I was curious, and I had a lot of questions, especially in January, just how bad are we, how bad we've been doing. And so I looked at a period of record, and so the period of record for these graphs essentially go back to 1978, and 78 forward is a snowtail record, and then the corresponding snow course from 78 to the 1950s. And why this is the March 1, and so this is March 1 data, and so when you look at the SWE graphs, the projection graphs, that's based on today's date, and that is just the snowtail record. So there's a differences between the two, and that's why. So when we look at March 1, we can see that 2018 was not by any means great compared to some of the previous years, and then we look at the years that are worse, and these years are worse than 2018 on March 1st. So that ranks it at 7th or 8th worst year on record in the Bear. You can see there's like 2 or 3, 4 there that are pretty close to 2018, which are only off by a couple of tenths of an inch of SWE. So you can see 1977 was by far the worst in the Bear. So that's still holding a record there. Now we work our way down to Beaver, Ogden River. You can see that solid line there, the dark black line is our 2018 current water year. You can also see that over the last couple of weeks that's really bumped up, and so the storms this month of March has really improved a lot of the basins, and you're going to see that pattern in many of the projection graphs in the next few slides. So currently on March 1 it was really in the low records, but since then it's improved, and now we're sitting at 68%, and it's ranked about 10th worst year on record. And so when we look at the March 1 numbers, we can see that there were only 4 or 3 other years that were worse. And these years, 1961, 77, and 1981, are really the 3 years that seem to crop up the most as the worst years on record. And you'll see that kind of repeated throughout most all the basins. Northeast, that's doing pretty well, 89% of normal right now. And so it's really bumped up. It's really benefited a lot from the past few storms. And its ranking is at 23rd. So we'll look at the 2018 compared to period of record here. And we've got about, it ranks at about 9th worst snow year on record. And this one only goes back to 1961. So when I selected the sites for each of the basins, I tried to pick at least 4 snowtails or 4 snow courses that went back in time. And so these, just so you know, this map or this bar charts here, they all have a minimum of 4 basins or a minimum of 4 snowtail sites or snow courses, up to 7 snow courses, except for Beaver and what was the other one? Lower Severe. You know, there were only 2 sites that were really went back a long ways for record on those 2 sites. So Duchesne River, as you can see, in March it was terrible. It was tracking the worst snow course or snowtail record going back to 78, and it was 0 percentile on March 1, and again that benefited tremendously from the last few storms. Now, Duchesne, it caught a little bit of snow in October and November, December, January, February, but every month it was below normal sweet catch, and so we're playing catch up. And March, I anticipate that we'll be pretty close to normal sweet catch, and might actually gain a little bit there. Duchesne River, worst record was 1961 and 77. So it's the third worst snow on March 1. It was the third worst year on record. And so, I've talking to the water users and whatnot, I know it's not very encouraging that you are actually not the worst year on record. You're only the third or fourth worst year. That does little to make you feel better, but yeah, you take what you can get. Provo, Jordan. Boy, I've had a nice big bump over the last few weeks, and I think that's going to keep going up too. That's at 70% right now. We'll look at the period of record. This goes back to 1955. And again, 1961 and 77 pop up. So 77 is still very much the winning record as the lowest snowpack record on snowpack on record. We hope to not see that again. Tooele Valley. It's at 60%. It benefited a little bit, not quite as much as some of the other basins. And Price San Rafael, again, that jumped up pretty nicely. It's currently at 57%. And the record for Snowtail, it's on a third worst on record. And when we go back and looked all the way back to 1960, there were 3 worst years. And again, you see 1961. 1977 and 1981. Lower Severe is at 66%. And again, you see those same numbers, 61, 77, 81. Upper Severe. Upper Severe is doing a little better as only the, what is that, the 6th worst snowpack on record. Again, this is March 1, so I anticipate these graphs actually will improve come April 1. And so I hope to update that and report that in the next monthly report come April 1. And if you don't get the email, let me know. I send out, I think I have everybody on a list of recipients, and I can put you on that list, and I can email you a report once we have it. And if you don't want to be on an email list, you can simply go to the website and download the document there. And we also post it on our website. So feel free to give me a call or shoot me an email if you want to be on the mailing list for our monthly reports. So everybody's doing okay. Sometimes you it kind of blows. Sand pitch. Again, you see a nice bump there over the last couple of weeks. So anticipate we're going to end up better than we initially thought. Now, sand pitch, this monthly sweet accumulation, this shows really well all the southern basins experience this sort of monthly accumulation of sweet, where we didn't get anything in November, nothing in October, and very little in December. That's why that January 1 number for southern basins was so abysmal, was because we just simply didn't have the snowpack. And so ever since January 1, we've been trying to play catch up. I mean, January was a pretty good accumulation month for that basin, and February too. But we just had a lot to catch up based on from the lack of snow from the previous months. So sand pitch, going back to 1953, we have 61, 77, 81, or worse than 2018. Dirty Devil, it's bounced up a little bit, but still not doing very well across the record. But it is from March 1 on number 5, with 61, 64, and 77 and 81. The Beaver, this one's improving too, thankfully, because the Beaver has been having a real tough time. In December, January 1, it had, as you know, it had 6% normal, and so it had like ½ inch of SWE, and usually January 1, normally you'd have 6 inches of SWE. And so it was the worst basin on record for this snow year. And it only had the 1 year that was worse. So that was a very close call in 1977, going back to 1954. And so we give that the crying emoji. Oh, God awarded that. Yeah, I did an emoji, I know. I got a smartphone finally. I don't really like emojis that much, though. So Southwest. Southwest it's always not a lot of snow there, but this was not a good year. But as I said the other day, there's a lot of not good years down in the Southwest. So 63, 64, 77, 81, 2002, and 2014. And Escalante, it's bouncing up a little bit. It's still not doing quite as well. In the Southeast, we've seen some improvement on that as well. So that percent ranking on as of today is 5th, and it's at 56%. And period of record going back to 56 is actually number 7th as of March 1. So I expect after March, and again on April 1, we'll see an improvement on period of record of many of these basins, and they will probably improve from 2nd, 3rd, or 4th by another 2 or 3 years maybe. So it's all mind-blowing. You guys watch Seinfeld? We always end up referencing Seinfeld sometimes in the office. It's and so we'll talk a little bit about the soils. So basically the story of the soils is that they're pretty close to normal, or just slightly below normal up north, northern Utah, and then they just kind of dry out as it goes down south. And especially when we hit the very southern basins, you'll see that the soils are very dry. And so when we look at Provo and Weber, they're still, Provo's a little below and Weber's a little above. And the soil moisture for lower severe and upper severe are both, because we're progressing southward, they're a little below normal. And then sand pitch and the price are also below normal. And we get in the southwestern and southeastern, and they are bouncing around with the lowest driest soils on record that we have at these sites. Now, the soils, as you know, will affect the effectiveness of efficient runoff. And so if you are expecting a low runoff number and you have dry soils, you might actually anticipate getting a lower number runoff to fill your reservoirs. So the one bright side again to this entire water year is that last year we had a tremendous water year, and many of the basins had an excellent carryover from the previous year. And so right now, as you can see statewide, we're at about 75% compared to 58% last year. And so there's a lot of basins that, or a lot of reservoirs that are the bigger ones that are doing really quite well from the snowpack from last year. So if you're going to have a crappy year, it's best to have it after a really good year, and this is the case for this year. Now, what everybody's asking is, what's it going to give us next year? That's a good question. I don't have that answer. So I threw this chart up. This is NOAA forecast over the next 48 hours. And as you can see, Utah is dark green to purple, and so we're anticipating, or NOAA is predicting, a pretty good storm over the next 48 hours that's going to, it'll bump up our sweep percentage. The purple is a rain-snow mix. I looked around, it looks like they are predicting anywhere from 5 to 10 inches of snow. So we might see another inch of sweep up in the mountains, possibly more if the storm does well. And it looks like there's another storm tracking after this one, towards the end of the weekend. And so we'll keep our fingers crossed, and that will improve our numbers quite a bit. Well, not quite a bit. It'll improve them a little bit, to be honest. So to sum it up, Bear River and northeastern Uintas, we're at 81 and 91%. Those two, again, have benefited from the weather pattern that we've seen this year. Rest of the basins were at 50 to 69, and now most of them, as of today, are in the 60% range. So that's an improvement. As of from the March 1 stream flow forecast, the north are expecting 60 to 75%, mid-north is 40 to 60s, and south is 20 to 50%. Even if we have really good return over the next few weeks with snowpack, I don't anticipate the stream flow forecast to bump up that much. So I would still anticipate below normal runoff. And then, of course, putting our nail in the coffin, some of those basins that have the dry soils, you can expect even potentially less of a runoff from the dry soils and less efficiency from the runoff period. March 1 reservoirs are at 75% compared to 58 last year. Given the low snowpack conditions that we have, I would expect that our runoff period will start 2 to 3 weeks earlier than normal. And again, expect below average runoffs. And I'm a little sad that Brian's not here because I make everybody depressed and then he makes everybody cry. So I can always count on him to have a more depressing talk. So my predecessor, Randy Julander, has been known for many, many quotes, and usually a barnyard reference or two, and this has always been one of my favorite quotes from Randy. A day without snow is just another crappy day of sunshine. That's it, folks. That's all I got. Anybody have any questions?
Any questions for Troy? Yes, Corey.
Just a general question. Can you tell us a little, do you know anything about the conditions back in '77 and what statewide ugliness that we're referring to there?
Well, I remember Randy would talk about that year, and he called it the year of no snow. And he remembered driving through Yellowstone Basin in March. So it was just, it wasn't, here this year we were looking bad in Utah, but Montana was pretty good. So in '77, the whole West was just dry, as I understand it. Because I was around, but I was only 7.
So it's just that high pressure system just camping out for a longer time period?
Yeah, I think so. Although, that's a good question. I'll follow up on that and get a little more feel for it, because I don't know, I bet people in this room probably remember '77 to some degree. They might be able to answer better.
Mr. Chairman, Bud Adams, they call it the wettest drought on record because it got no snow and then we got a lot of rain, or at least a little bit more rain. So.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, my personal experience was on the 26th of December in 1976, on the '77 water year, I climbed to the top of the Wellsville Mountains and was kicking dust on the top of the Wellsville Mountains that winter. And I remember owning a snowmobile that year, and I went snowmobiling up Blacksmith Fork, and there was a little snow, but there was a lot of dust behind all the snowmobiles as we were going on our little bit of snow back then. And not a lot of you are old enough to remember the drought of '61, but I was like 10 years old back then, and it was an equally mild, dry winter at the northern end of the state too. So,
Yeah.
anyway.
I want to point something out here. They've been posting this little tidbit here on a website, and that says we anticipate this map will not be available next year due to staffing constraints, and gives alternate maps. Now I know these maps are used by a lot of people.
Yeah.
I use them all the time. So I got a fine line to walk here because I don't want to get myself fired, but I'll tell you what I do know, or what I can believe I can tell you, is that we snow survey isn't the budget isn't getting slashed. It's just we've been having a lot of trouble having authority and given authorization to hire people. So we've had a lot of people retire over the last few years, and the Western Weather Climate Center that makes these maps over in Portland, a lot of their people have retired, and they just have not been given the authority to hire people to fill those positions. And all of our DCLs, all our offices are feeling that. I've got When we're fully staffed, we have 7 people, and now we're down to 4 people. And so we're feeling a little tight there. For some reason, NRCS has been under a hard freeze, so we haven't been allowed to hire people. And I think that is largely due to the fact that we have an acting chief. And so the word on the street is that we will have a permanent position filled with a permanent person. And when that happens, usually that will help open the gates for us to hire people. That's what I'm hoping for. And sometimes people ask me what they can do, and I would suggest that you contact my state conservationist, Tim Wilson. And he was here at the conference this week, and I liked him a lot. He's very supportive, and he actually has been he can't hire people. His authority to do that has been stripped from him, and even our regional conservationist, he can't hire people. And so what I would suggest that you do is that you call or email Tim and ask him and tell him how important this data is and these maps are, and stress to him that the importance of it, and ask him if there's a letter you can write, or if there's anything you can provide to him that then he can take on over to DC and show and say, hey, there's a lot of people back west that really wants this data, and we need to get these positions filled. So I think I could tell you all that and not get fired. So, and Tim's great. Please, when you do talk to him, don't be talking to him in a mean way, because that might come back to me. We don't want that. And he wants us to succeed, but he needs the proof that, hey, we need these positions filled, and this is why. So we're still working on this fix here, and hopefully these maps will still be available. If they're not, we will work up an alternative to what these maps have provided you, and we'll keep you posted on that. Okay? Oh, any more questions? Anyone?
Troy, just real quick, I think in February you told us that the Bear and the Northeast Uint has had a 20% chance of hitting normal, and the rest of the state was about 10%. Even with the increased snow, I'm guessing we're way below those numbers.
No,
even.
no, it's too late in the game.
Okay.
We won't hit normal in any of the basins,
Okay.
but at least we won't be at 50%. So, okay.
Okay, thank you, Troy, and we appreciate your letting us know the severity of the position you guys are in and how critically important it is to us in the water business to have you functioning for our benefit. So, thank you for that. And one quick comment, even though this is a rotating position as chairman, I was very grateful that Steve Farrell wasn't throwing paper airplanes at me today.
We're not done yet.
So I feel your pain. Yes, Juliet Tanner.
Mr. Chair, I'm wondering, and it says speak into the mic. I'm not sure which mic I need to be speaking into. All right, we're
Just
very
speak
good.
loudly.
I'm wondering if it might be appropriate for us as a board to do an official board letter in support of these maps continuing. So I know you've suggested that perhaps, as individuals we should reach out. Would it be helpful if as a board we submitted a letter or appropriate?
Yeah,
I think it would be.
I think that would be excellent, actually. Yeah.
Okay.
I
Do I
think
need to make
this
a motion?
board carries some weight, and
Yeah.
I think it's critical to our success.
So
Yes, I've eaten well while I've been here.
there are many. So Randy was in a snow survey. He's had a snow survey for over 20 years, and there was in that time period there was a year where their budget was likely to get really slashed, and many people approached him, asked him what to do, and he gave out the phone number of the chief of NRCS. He said, call the chief. And he got a phone call from the chief. He said, I give up. I'll give you your money. Don't do this again. So I'm asking you to go through the channels. Besides, our chief is acting, so that's actually not helpful at all. All right, thank
Hey,
you.
Troy, we'll try to be discreet when we send our letter or make our comments. Thank you very much. All right, our next agenda item are the feasibility reports, and our first feasibility report is E401, West Porterville Irrigation. And we have here today Mr. Kip Adams, president of the West Porterville Irrigation Company, and we have Mr. Brian Dieter of JUB Engineering. So please come forward, and we will have Ben Merritt make a presentation to the board, and then we will ask you questions following.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. The West Porterville Irrigation Company is located approximately 6 miles south of Morgan in Weaver County. There are 110 shareholders in the company who collectively irrigate about 760 acres of agricultural land. The irrigation company diverts water from Hardscrabble Creek, which is delivered through over 6 miles of pressurized irrigation pipe. The current system has some significant deficiencies. The pipeline has exceeded its expected useful life and requires frequent repairs. It's made of asbestos concrete, which is extremely difficult to work with because it is a hazardous material. And their equalization pond is not quite large enough, and as a result of that, debris frequently collects on the screen, and it requires frequent cleaning. You can kind of see the photo in the background on the slide there of the screen covered in debris. The proposed project includes abandoning the existing line and replacing it with about 25,000 feet of fused HDPE, which will range from 18 inches down to about 8 inches. They want to increase the size of the equalization pond to approximately 4 acre-feet. They're going to install a new screening structure on the intake of the pipeline. They will install a 15 kilowatt micro hydropower pressure reducing valve, and they will obviously adjust alignments as necessary to reconnect the turnouts. Project benefits include reduced operation and maintenance expenses. They are estimated to conserve approximately 550 acre-feet of water. There will be less debris in their pipeline to plug up their sprinkler systems, less cleaning of the screen, greater equalization in their pond, and of course the hydropower production from their micro hydropower PRV valve. Funds are expected to come out of the revolving construction fund, and they have been awarded a $1 million Water Smart grant. So staff recommends the board authorize 45% of the project, up to $971,000, and this project be purchased at 0% interest over 30 years with annual payments of approximately $32,000 per year. And this is staff's report.
Thank you, Ben, for that report. Mr. Adams, Mr. Dieter, do you have additional information to give to the board?
We're excited as a president of the company, our area and our community really need this because of but obviously there's a lack of water in the mountains we have, but also because of the numerous leaks we have in the existing line, losing a tremendous amount of water that's affecting the farmers in our area that rely solely upon that as their primary income. So this would be a great benefit to those in the area.
Good to hear. Anything from you, Brian?
No. Answer questions.
Okay, questions from the board?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I have a question dealing with, in reading through your proposal, going to leave most of the old pipeline in the ground with the exception of where you need to for different crossings and stuff. You going to do anything special to stabilize those old pipelines down there, or just cover them up, block them off? What are your plans there?
We're going to block them off in some locations just to prevent existing irrigators from trying to use that old transite pipe, but otherwise we're just banding it in place. Because it's extremely expensive to dispose of, as you
Yeah.
probably know.
Yeah. In our earlier discussion that we had in our briefing meeting, a question came up just looking at costs. And the engineering costs were about double proportionately than the other engineering costs for the other projects today. We wondered if there was a reason for that.
We included construction engineering, full-time construction observation, and they're lumped in those costs, as well as the environmental assessment that's required
Okay.
by WaterSmart.
So it was part of the environmental with the asbestos and all that. That's what we assumed, but we were just curious.
Kyle?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Again, part of the write-up indicates that the installation of the new pipe will follow the existing easements as much as they can, but there may be some areas where you have to cross private property and obtain easements. Do you anticipate any problem with those property owners in obtaining those new easements?
No, we held a shareholder meeting last week prior to this and reviewed the proposed line and identified there's 4 or 5 areas that may have to go outside of the current easement. And the reason why we chose why that would happen is because we want to eliminate some cost, just to shorten the distance of the line. Those owners of those properties have been informed and contacted, and as of now, we don't have any objections or anything to the line and the proposed route.
Then one follow-up question also, and I don't know whether you've been given this or not. I'm assuming they have been the requirements that they have to meet prior to coming back for committal of funds.
Yes.
As you've reviewed those 4 or 5 items on there, do you anticipate any problems in meeting any of those requirements? And I realize that you may not have them and have had an opportunity to fully review them, but as far as getting an approved adoption of a resolution for the board from your shareholders, do you already have that to proceed with the project? Legal, have your attorney give the Board of Water Resources written legal opinions of those areas? Do you anticipate any problems with any of those?
No, and what will happen now, I met with some of the board members last night. After this meeting, the next week, we're going to hold another board meeting and also another shareholder meeting to discuss these items and finalize them. As of now, we don't anticipate any problems.
Okay.
That it, Kyle?
Got another question. Your micro hydropower,
Yeah.
what's that all about? What are you proposing there?
We included that because that gives you some more points when you're making the WaterSmart grant application, where they already had a PRV in the system. We added that just to help get the points to get the WaterSmart grant.
Plan
But
on
it's-
using it?
Yeah, it's a PRV in parallel with micro hydro, and then the hydro goes out, we still have to reduce pressure. So it's not completely eliminating the hydro, it is something that's in addition to the PRV.
That was the landowner where this is going to set is very excited about that because he himself is going green on his home. And so he's pretty excited to have that. It's no problem.
So he'll be the recipient of that power generation?
You'll sell that to him?
Yep, his home's already set up for it.
Okay. One question on that. Is that power generation going to run year-round, or is it just during the irrigation season?
It'd just be during the irrigation season.
Okay.
So there would be typically from about April 15th to October 1st because we have water through the system.
Okay. Have you had any issues with the fish component of this
No,
screening, or
There shouldn't be any fish getting into the pipeline.
it's screened?
Yeah, it's screened as it comes out of their pond.
Okay.
It is already in this project as well.
Okay. Questions? Any other questions from the board? If not, Mr. Stevens?
I'll make a motion then, Mr. Chairman, that the board authorize 45% of the project cost up to $971,000, and that the project be purchased at 0% interest over 30 years with annual payments of approximately $32,000.
Mr. Stevens makes a motion. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
Mr. Ipson makes a second to the motion. Any further discussion on the project? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen. Next agenda item is E403 Pioneer Canal Company. And we have with us today Mr. Guy Taylor, Mr. Keith Hooper, Mr. Chris Thompson from Civco Engineers.
Guy, at least you get to be down there, not up here.
And
At least you get to be down there, not up here.
Maurice Egbert is going to make the presentation, so.
Apologize for this little bleep. Oh, it stopped. I thought it was interference with my new braces. Okay. All right. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, the Pioneer Canal Company is coming for funding for a project. They serve about 1,400 acres of ag land. There's about 40 shareholders. I'm going to zoom in on this map. We zoomed out so you get a little bit of lay of feel for the geographical area. We'll zoom in there. There's both a little bit of red pipe where the red line where the actual project would be, and then the lighter blue is the rest of the canal. Oh, it's there. So they divert out of the Duchesne River up on the north, the top right corner there, the northwest corner there, and then carry through this main canal. The main canal is about 2.5 miles long. It's in some places still earth lined, and in the 70s they started doing some concrete lining, and they are continually having to do some patchwork. Here's some of the concrete lining, as many of you that have dealt with concrete line canals kind of see how that works and see the vegetation start pushing. They've got a pretty steep hill there on the upside, trying to deal with that. So that's some of the conditions they're dealing with. You can see the overgrowth in through there as well. Here through some of the earth lined. So they would like to, they're hoping to eventually pipe the entire main canal, but they're looking to get some salinity funding to be able to afford that. They do not have that at this time. I'm going to go back to the map. This first 3,000 feet in red is one of the most difficult areas for both washing out and for seepage issues. They've had some flooding issues. Beavers will dig out where some of the earth line is, and they also, it's a pretty flat slope, so they get a lot of sedimentation in the canal itself and have to clean that out. Just in that first few thousand feet, they're estimating that over the last several years, their maintenance costs have been about $3,000 annually just for that one section. And then down at the bottom of the map, you'll see it goes back in, the canal leads back into the Duchesne River. They've got such a flat slope, they've got to have a lot of what we call carrier water to get that water down to the end of the canal. Now they pay the Bureau of Reclamation for storage, but it's dependent on how much water they use. Well, the only measuring spot they've got is at the top of the canal. So whatever they return at the bottom of the canal, they do not have a measuring device right now. The company's estimating they pay upwards of maybe $7,000 a year in extra or additional money of that's water that's actually returned to the river, but right now they can't measure that, and so they have to pay for it. So part of the project would include putting in a measuring device there as well. So they will pipe that first 3,000 feet, put in a new inlet structure, the measuring device, and let me fast forward. So they're looking to get reduced storage payments to BOR, reduce maintenance costs for canal cleaning, repairs, flooding issues. There will be a little bit of savings of water, but not really enough for any sort of agricultural benefits. About 100 acre feet just for this part, and certainly no pressurized system going in yet. So they are also getting a grant from the Utah Department of Ag and Food of $100,000. It's a 25% cost share. So for this portion of the project, they're looking to do a project at least $400,000 and keep it around that to be able to come up with their 75% cost share to get that grant. So they're asking the board for 60% of the total share of funding for $240,000. And staff recommends the board authorize 60% of this project cost up to $240,000, that it be purchased at 0% interest over 20 years with annual payments of approximately $12,000. That's staff's report.
Thank you, Marisa. Questions for you, gentlemen and lady? I just wondered what the Utah Department of Ag and Food Grant, what is that specifically called? Does that have something to do with salinity control, or?
It's a water resource grant. It's the first time they're doing the program. So this is one of the first projects funded by it. What they're doing is they're trying to put some money out there to help them obtain other funding. And so this is the first year they awarded 3 grants. And they'll be making more money available next year.
Okay, and it's a full grant, not a loan.
Well, it's a 3/4 match, but it is a 100% grant.
Okay. All right, very good.
You have to bring 3/4. It's only 1/4% of the project.
Sure, but it's still valuable,
Yeah.
extremely. And then I had a question about it described in the project that we read that the canal is very flat, and I was wondering if you have any issues with moss problems, or are there such pristine water that you don't get nutrient loading to create a moss problem?
There's a lot of moss growing on that flat areas. In fact, it would make the canal actually run over. It'll fill it up and push it out on the banks. So you continually have to clean that out. And then Marissa, if you go back to that map.
Don't get dizzy. Here we go.
Right there, okay. If you see there's 3 washes that come into the canal right there.
Yes.
Starting from the west, working down. When it rains, it really rains, and the water comes down and literally clogs the canal off. And it'll fill it clear full of rocks and sand and whatnot. So eventually what we want to do is pipe the whole thing, but right now this upper end is in dirt. From where that red line ends, that whole section is dirt. The green is cement, what's left of the cement.
Sure.
Which they did, I don't know, 40 years ago or something. But anyway, that upper end is continually washing out up there because it's just dirt on the banks, and the landowners that are there are getting destroyed. You know, they can't even put their crops in down there because it's continually seeping out in there and making a mess. But that's why that is the urgent part right now, is that upper end.
Okay.
And we're still losing return water back to the river through that dirt section, a lot more than we are in the cement. So.
Okay. But getting back to my question, is moss an issue for you guys?
Moss is definitely an issue.
So you do spend money on moss control?
Yes.
That you would potentially save here.
Sure.
And then we had a discussion in our briefing meeting, but I think was answered this, but who's going to maintain the open channel going forward? Is that going to be your obligation, or is somebody else for flood control?
That's that question.
The area is still pretty rural. I think that in the canal, most of the flooding will go over the canal. They'll drop sediment stuff in the channel. It's not going to be a major impact to the flooding, so it'll be historically, it'll be similar to what it was in the past, with minus, the canal flows 30 CFS, and out of those canyons you're probably going to see, 100 to 200. So it'll continue historically how it has over the top of the pipeline.
But probably the open channel will silt in and it'll just run farther down the hill.
Yeah, the channel, so the current section we're pipe with this section is not affected. It's not used for flood control.
Okay.
But the future pipeline, that will be an issue that they'll have to address.
Okay. Thank you. Questions from the board? Lenny?
In your in the proposed finances on here, it doesn't say anything at all, no costs or anything for a measuring device. We were curious about that it wasn't included in it. What type of measuring device are you proposing, and what's the estimate on how much the measuring device would cost? Does it have a data logger, all that stuff? Ramp flume, we're assuming, but just curious on that because it says part of the project, the scope is a measuring device, and yet it's not included in any of the costs.
Well, the quote we got,
Go ahead.
what do you have? The quote we got on it was $4,500 to put that in. But I'm not sure what kind. The upper one has the data logger and everything in it, so I would assume the bottom one would also have to have that to be able to record what we're doing. So.
It was initially not part of the first part of the project. It's something we've added to the project, so it was not included in the cost estimate. But there's enough money in contingency, and then also we did have some money, when you break down the inlet structure, there was some money included in there for flume. So we might find a way to reutilize the flume at the beginning, and there was going to be some new SCADA put in up there, so maybe we'll use that money. So we'll work it out so that we won't need to come back and request more funds.
So that will work within your budget. Okay.
Good catch.
Any additional questions from the board? If not, Mr. Lemon?
Mr. Chairman, I would make a recommendation that the board authorize 60% of the project costs up to $240,000, that the project be purchased at 0% interest over 20 years with annual payments of approximately $12,000.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
Steve or okay. Steve Farrell seconds the motion. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you. It's your board time.
Next agenda item is E406, Deseret Irrigation Company. Got to thumb through the paperwork here for a couple of seconds. Oh, get that. Oh, there.
Good afternoon again, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. The Deseret Irrigation Company is located about 3 miles southwest of Delta in Millard County. They have about 268 shareholders. They irrigate approximately 22,000 acres of agricultural ground. Water is diverted from the Sevier River system through the Gunnison Bend Reservoir, shown on the north end of that map there. Their canal system that's highlighted there in red has a few serious deficiencies. There are some pretty seriously eroded canal banks, which are a hazard to safety. They increase the canal company's liability. There are also some pretty significant seepage losses estimated at about 3,920 acre-feet per year. Here you can see my Van Gogh of the canal. I drew the red line on there to illustrate just how seriously the canal bank is eroded. And there are several spots on the canal that look just like that, weren't there? There was more than one.
A little over a quarter of a mile down
Yeah.
from there, yeah.
The proposed project includes lining the canal with 20 mil polyethylene liner and reconstructing the canal banks where necessary. Project benefits include the reduced risk of catastrophic failure. They will conserve the estimated 3,920 acre-feet per year, and they will use that water to boost crop yield. The project is expected to come out of the revolving construction fund. The staff recommends that the board authorize 80% of the project cost, up to $999,000, and that the project be purchased at 0% interest over 10 years with annual payments of approximately $99,900. And this is staff's report.
Thank you very much, Ben, and I would like to welcome Mr. Jerry Scheme, President of Deseret Irrigation Company, and Mr. Jesse Ralphs, Engineer for Sunrise Engineering Company. Gentlemen, would you like to add further to Ben's comments?
Yeah, we're looking forward to getting this canal lined before we lose that bank, where you can see that it's real thin there. And anyway, we've worked with the board for a lot of years and appreciate what you guys do for us. And as an agricultural community, it's one of the few places we can get financing, to do these types of projects. And we have a long history with you guys. Appreciate you for that. The other question I had is, we've got some dam safety issues coming up on our DMAT spillway, and whatnot in 19. I was wondering if we could move those payments over a 12-year period. Instead of a 10-year period, it would level our assessments out, and then with the additional payments we'll have with the dam, it won't raise your assessments quite as high.
Okay. Note your request. Mr. Ralphs, do you have anything to add?
I don't. Open to questions, but I don't have anything further that Ben hasn't covered here.
Okay. Question I have, I think I had a couple. One is on your liner, 20 mil polyethylene liner. Is that just going to be strictly polyethylene liner? Is there going to be a backer to it, or is it?
From the product sheets that we pulled on that, it's a 20 mil polyethylene liner, but it's encased or it's sandwiched between two non-woven layers, kind of a backer layer.
Okay.
The puncture resistance of the material.
Okay, so you won't need to put sand or anything underneath it with that type of liner?
No, not sand. We talked with NRCS. They did the design on it. We talked with them on the subgrade there, how to prep that. There were no specific requirements other than not having any rocks or sharp objects underneath it. And then it'll be backfilled on top of that to protect the erosion from coming pulling it off the top side of it.
Okay, but this is not like a Husker liner, it's just polyethylene with a backer?
It is a Husker liner.
It is Husker brand liner?
Yes,
Okay.
8208 is the product number on that.
Okay, so you've looked at that and feel like that's a good product to go with?
Yeah, but we've looked at it. We've talked to Husker about the liner. We've talked to people that have put it in. Like I said, I haven't heard bad things about it.
Sure. Yeah, I know the Jordan Northern used it a number of years ago, and I'd be interested to look at it after you get it put in. So.
I was speaking with Craig Bagley the other day when they did their dam remediation on DMAT. The upper section had some sand boils, and so they had to go in and line the canal for that section. That was the same product that they used for that to keep the sand boils from coming around up through the dam, and back into the canal.
Sure.
So that's been 7 years ago,
7
probably.
years.
It's worked real well there. On the specs on the fiber, I think it was 94 or 95, with the board's help, we did the bottom end of this same canal on the east side of the river down to the end of where the dirt ditch was there. We used a 10 mil plastic, just a polyethylene lining. It's held up really well. And this is a lot better product than what that is, but a 5/16 rod, it takes 150 pounds pressure to push a 5/16 rod through this, and the other was not near that, but by the time you get a cow's hoof or whatever, the area spread out, it's strong enough that it'll withstand all that, so.
And there shouldn't be any cows in that ditch right there.
No, I've never known them.
I've never seen one.
The lake doesn't live too far from there.
Sure. Questions from the board? No questions?
Mr.
Yes.
Chairman,
Mr. Ibsen?
I'm actually a stockholder in Deseret Irrigation Company, and so I will need to recuse myself from any vote on this.
Okay, we understand. Mr. Ibsen will recuse himself from voting, and I believe we've got...
Question from staff relating to the request for extended.
Yes, I should note that extending the payment from 10 years to 12 years will decrease the annual payments to approximately $83,300 per year.
And is that appropriate?
Over 12 years.
Yeah, with their loans we've had before, the Board of Water Resources, it's been in that same area. And, when we did the last DMAT remediation, we had some on top of that, but that works real well with their budget, so I think we got you guys paid off 2 years ago, and we used the money, we kept assessments the same to pay our 20%, and we're ready to jump back in and improve some more canals, so anyway, we got lots of them out there. This particular canal, I'm assuming probably about 120 years old, something like that.
Okay, very good. Mr. Johnson?
I'll make a motion then that the
Board authorize up to 80% of the project cost, up to $999,000, and that the project be purchased at 0% interest for 12 years with an annual payment of approximately $83,200. 83.3.
I'll second that motion.
Motion's been made. Mr. Stevens seconds the motion. Is there any further discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed, and Mr. Ibsen recuses himself. The motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen, and good luck, and we'll be interested to see how it works out.
Yeah, we'll get in touch with them, and hopefully we can have another field trip like we had last summer down in Dallas. So.
Yeah, great. We appreciate you taking care of us then.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Next agenda item is Muddy Creek Irrigation, and today we have Mr. Morris Sorensen, President, Mr. Jim Fowler, and Mr. Merrill Johnson from J&J Engineering. Oh, and we're overwhelmed with engineers and applicants. Mr. Kerry Van Dyke from Jones DeMille Engineering, and Mr. Garrick Wilden from Jones DeMille Irrigation. And with that, we will turn to Jacqueline Pacheco, and she will give us a brief review of the project. Jacqueline?
Muddy Creek Irrigation Company has been a vital contributor to the agricultural community in Emery County, diverting irrigation water to an arid environment. It has been in operation since 1886 and was incorporated in 1964. Approximately 5% of the water is diverted to the town of Emery for culinary and secondary use. The applicant serves approximately 107 shareholders, irrigating 7,800 acres of land. The shareholders are divided into the Emery series, which is their western distribution area, and the Moore Group Independent Canal, which is the east distribution area. This project will directly benefit the Moore Group Independent Canal. The applicant received financial assistance from the board in 2008 to replace its diversion structure on Muddy Creek with a new structure incorporating sedimentation basins, and in 2011 to install a 6.3-mile pipeline. Assistance for these projects is anticipated to be returned by 2033. The proposed project is to replace 1.2 miles of open canal and 2.82 miles of existing non-pressurized and deteriorating pipe with a new pressurized pipeline. The non-pressurized pipeline sustained two major breaks in 2017, requiring the replacement of about 300 feet of pipe. And these are a couple of pictures of the portions that were replaced. The sediment from the creek fills canals, ditches, and pipes. Mud buildup has diminished the capacity and doesn't allow the shareholders to receive their full allotment of water. So these are some pictures of the current canal. Project benefits include 443 acre-feet of water conserved annually that is currently lost through seepage and evaporation, decreased operations and maintenance costs, improved water quality and liability of that portion of the canal will be removed. The applicant has received grants from the NRCS and the Utah Conservation Commission to cover a portion of the project costs. Staff recommends that the board authorize 65% of the project cost, up to $1,671,000, and the projects be purchased at 1% interest over 23 years with annual payments of approximately $82,600. That is staff's report.
Thank you, Jacqueline. You gentlemen have anything to add to Jacqueline's report on this segment of your proposals today?
This canal for the Independence Series, the two series have separate, they are assessed differently. In other words, they have their own assessment, and the Emery series has their own assessment. On this pipeline for the Independent, if something isn't done within the next 4 or 5 years, that pipeline will fail. We'll be without water for that acreage.
Okay. Now, this first proposal is for the Moore, or is it for the Independent?
Independent.
More,
Independent more.
more is independent.
Okay, all right, all right.
Well, the people over there are.
They are.
Argumentative too.
And I misspoke, it's Jim Fauber
Yes, sir.
and Merrill Johansson. Okay, I better not get Johansson wrong on this board, or I'll be in trouble with somebody, won't I?
I don't usually report back how they said my name.
Well, you know. We know who was here before and have a lot of respect for that man. So, anyway, I don't believe I have any questions. Does the board have questions? Yes, Blaine?
Mr. Chairman, help me understand this just a little bit. So there are you have one irrigation company, the Muddy Creek Irrigation Company. You have two different branches of it, the Emery Canal that goes to Emery and south and out at Quichimpaw and all that stuff. And then you have the one that goes over to Moore with the Independent Canal. Two different diversions, but one company, one set of water rights basically for the company. How do the assessments work? How do your stockholder votes work? It's just intriguing. This whole thing's intriguing to me in the sense that you have two different, we're going to hear another project for the other component of the company in just a few minutes here. And we have two different engineering firms, two different projects, two different assessments, one company. Can you kind of just explain how all that fits together?
Yeah, started out, they were two separate irrigation companies. And in 1962, they incorporated, and they made the shares equal. One had river rights and the other had small reservoirs up there. And so it was beneficial to incorporate. So in 1962, they incorporated. But the bank account, we have one secretary and everything. We have 5 board members from the Emery series and 2 board members with an alternate from the Independent series. They make up their own assessment due to what expenses they have with operation and maintenance, and we do the same thing. So the assessment isn't necessarily the same. Theirs could be higher than ours, or ours could be higher than theirs, depending on the operation and maintenance and other expenses of the two. But it comes together and in one board with 3 of them being represented. Irrigation is a 20-80 split. That was the decree, 20%, and then there's a few shares of the Emery series that they have purchased out there. So there's a few shares of the Emery series that goes to the Independent or the Moore side, but the assessments are separate.
So how do the water rights work as far as when the Independent is committing some of its water rights, and yet Muddy Creek owns all the water rights. The company has titled all the water rights, but are some of the water rights dedicated only for Moore with the Independent Canal, and the other water rights dedicated only for the down to Quichimpaw and the Emery stuff and all of that?
That is the way it is, but you can, because of the two, you can transfer one back and forth to the other. But the assessment still stays on that side, so if the shares go one way or the other, it's likely to be double assessed.
For example, I take Emery series water,
and I bring it into the independent canal, I pay the Emery series assessment, also have to pay on that same water the independent series assessment. So I'm doubly assessed on that water because I'm using it in the independent side. I can move it back to Emery and only pay one assessment, but it's beneficial for me to have it on the independent.
So as far as authorizing a project like this, where this project, even though it's Muddy Creek Irrigation Company project, it's for the independent canal, the pipeline we're talking right now, who makes the call as to the stockholders approving that project? Did just those two directors with the alternate and those stockholders over in Moore, are they the only ones that vote on approving that project, or does the remainder of the Emery branch vote on that?
Just the stockholders of the independent votes on theirs, and the Emery series would vote on the other side.
And that's why there'd be two different projects, two different engineering firms, that type of thing.
There's two different boards. There's a sub-board called the Independent Canal Board underneath of the Emery Board that decides on independent projects. And then there's the Emery that's over all of it.
And the bylaws and articles have all this sorted out, we're assuming. Is Wayne Staley, incidentally, just for curiosity, still around?
He is.
He was present last time I was involved over there.
I took over for him.
You took over for Wayne.
And he is still around.
Okay.
And we consult him from time to time.
So does the Emery board have to also approve what the independent board does?
No.
No. Just the independent board can make its own decisions?
As far as their portion of that.
Additional questions from the board?
I'm still kind of confused on
Well, I don't know. It sounds like it'd be a great system up on the Bear River Canal Company to me. I mean,
Now, Steve, you know me well enough. You just trust me.
Well, that's a scary thought.
That's why he's asking
So
questions.
if one section fails to make the payments, do we foreclose on the whole thing? The whole water right?
You've got them all now.
We
have a loan
Yeah.
now, so.
Well, that was a question I had. You looked at, in here in the proposal, it said the water rights that were going to be pledged to collateral. On this one that we're talking right now, it had 4 water rights listed. On the one that will be for the next, it had 7 or 8 or 9 or whatever water rights, and it included 3 out of these 4. Where was the 4th one on that, and where are the rest of the water rights on this? What are we really getting for collateral was a question I had as far as water rights. Because the two, if we're coming after the whole company as pledging collateral for the water rights, should not, in my mind, the water rights be the same being pledged on both of these projects? Because they're not.
There's 1,112.8 shares in the, no, 1,112.2 in the independent side. There's 4528.8 in the Emery side. So the two series are identified and as separate water shares. They are not designated. They're either designated as the Emery series or the independent series.
Maybe that'll need to be sifted out with your legal opinion or whatever on what water rights are actually being pledged and on the different things and which ones aren't, and sift all that out, because it doesn't match up the way in the proposal here right now.
Can I say something?
Shalane? Yes, please.
Addressing what you're calling collateral and the water rights and things. What you as the board here are doing is you're paying for a project. You don't have collateral, you own the project and the associated water rights. Any project that we do with Muddy Creek is with Muddy Creek. It's not with a portion of the company, it is with the entire company.
Yeah.
And the company is responsible. And when we do another project, so if we write 2 purchase agreements here, we will write them both to say, here's what we already own. We're going to keep it until not only they pay for that one, but now this one and this one too. So really for every project, you're gonna own them all. So until they're all paid off, they're not gonna get anything back, unless they come to us and say, okay, now we're in a spot. We've paid you all, but this one little one, could we please get something back? But that would require another action from the board. So it's not collateral. You will own the projects and the water rights until they're all paid off.
Shalane, how many contracts do we have now with Muddy Creek?
I don't know that.
3 or 4, I think.
Is it?
Two, okay.
Thank you, Ms. DiBernardi, for clarifying that question. So, with that, any additional questions from the board? If not, Mr. Johnson?
I'll make a motion then that the board authorize up to 65% of this project for cost up to $1,671,000 at the project to be purchased at 1% over 23 years with payments of approximately $82,600.
I'll second it.
There's a motion by Norm Johnson, a second by Steve Farrell, and just for clarification, this is project number E405. Any questions on the motion? If not, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Now we will proceed to E407, Muddy Creek Irrigation. So, similar suspects on my list here, so. Anyway, Jacqueline Pacheco, please present.
Okay, so this is a project that will benefit the Emery series. The proposed project is to extend the existing 6.3 mile pipeline from Muddy Creek an additional 4.1 miles and install regulating ponds, pipes, and sprinkler systems for local farms to reduce the high water table and subsequent salt loading. All of the 5,300 acres of the Emery series are currently flood irrigated. The on-farm sprinkler irrigation costs would be associated with another phase of the project. So these are just a couple pictures of the existing canal. So limited storage facilities and runoff patterns and water loss through seepage and result in inadequate water supply to shareholders. And here are just a couple more pictures of the canal. Project benefits include that 100 acre-feet of water will be conserved annually. Approximately 1,917 tons of salt will be reduced. And there'll be improved water quality. Muddy Creek has received a salinity offset grant from the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food for $3.6 million to cover a portion of the project. Staff recommends that the board authorize 21% of the project cost up to $1 million and that the project be purchased at 0% interest over 15 years with annual payments of approximately $66,700.
Is that your report, Jacqueline?
Yes, sorry, that's staff's report.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Gentlemen, have anything to add to this story besides you have salt on this one? And maybe salt's not all bad, huh?
There's one thing on there, due to expenses and everything, if we could, we'd like to extend that to 20 years instead of the 15 for the payback.
We weren't aware of that request prior to this, so we haven't had time to consider it or calculate that.
Joel's back there pushing a calculator.
0% are easy to calculate.
One added effect on this thing is this canal runs above the city of Emery. And about 15 years ago, maybe a little less, they'd have done a seepage loss just in about 2.5 miles of that canal, and it was just over 20%. They were losing. The water table in the city of Emery is about 3 feet. Shallower in some places, maybe a little more than that. That's about the average.
15 years. 20.
This would dry up.
Okay.
This whole thing. It's also a liability of, being above the city of Emery too.
Okay. Any additional questions from the board for these gentlemen on this 407 project?
What will the 20 years difference be?
It'll be $50,000 annually instead of the $66,700.
From 66,700 to 50,000 even.
Yeah.
From 15 years to
20 years.
20 years. And that's your request? Okay. Any discussion from the board about that request?
So it sounds like your intent is to further reduce salt load, continue on and go to all sprinklers. Is that your?
We're in the process of that. I have a meeting tomorrow with the bureau. We got salinity money too, and this is in 2 phases. This is what we call phase 2. It'll be this project, and we're going forward with phase 3. So eventually, everything in the valley should be under sprinkler within.
And you do have that $3.6 million grant in hand. Is that correct?
We do. That's from the mine offset money.
Yeah.
And so this phase 2 is the main canal pipeline or channel that would be piped, and then phase 3 would be those branches that come off of that main pipeline. And they would also be looking at submitting another request to assist with that portion.
And this will be pressurized, so you could do your sprinklers.
It's pressurized. The way it's designed, we shouldn't have to pump hardly any. There might be a few that there's existing pipeline of about 4 miles up there now, and we're just connecting it onto that and bringing it on in.
Okay, any other questions? Not, Mr. Johnson?
I'll make a motion then, Mr. Chairman, that the board authorize 21% of the project cost up to $1 million, and that the project be purchased at 0% interest over 20 years with an annual payment of approximately $50,000.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
Mr. Ipson seconds the motion. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations. Or condolences. Just to change up the agenda for just a bit, Mr. Ron Thompson, Title Secretary at this point, and Mr. Corey Cram, Associate General Manager, wish to address the board.
Well, I'm here for 2 reasons. The first, to thank you for coming to Utah's Dixie and for the tremendous effort you put on the state. Since you were at the dinner Monday, I'm not going to resist a lot of things I talked about it and say that this state would not be in the shape it is today if it had not had the influence of all the resources and revolving loans. It's just like the project you approved. The seed money you put in exceeds a $5 million project. That's probably the use of your money. And certainly on behalf of the Water District and our long relationship with you, we appreciate what you do and the hours and the time and your staff. And we probably get to know them better than most because we're working with them almost every day on the Lake Powell project. And they do a tremendous job for you. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Ron, and we appreciate your hospitality and all the years you've been of service to the general water community and the state of Utah. We've all benefited from your foresight. Moving to special items, we have item number E129, which is the St. George and Washington Canal Company water rights release. Turn to Todd Stoneley for his report.
Okay, well, Ron's coming up. I'll dive in. I'm filling in for Tom Cox, who is not here, but he prepared this report. In August 2004, the board authorized a multi-phased project to enclose the nearly 10-mile-long St. George and Washington Canal. Nearly $8.5 million of the board's funds were used to complete the work. As part of the funding agreement, the company agreed to turn over title to the 6 water rights listed in your report. The applicant has told us that with the conversion of much of the land in its service area from agricultural to municipal uses, it has the desire to make sure these water rights are protected against potential partial forfeiture. The applicant has arranged with Washington County Water Conservancy District, which along with St. George City owns or controls approximately 44% of the company shares, to take title to these water rights to protect them from any possible future forfeiture. The company requests the board amend the purchase agreement to allow the board to convey the water rights to Washington County Water Conservancy District once the project has been purchased. Staff recommends the board allow the purchase agreement to be amended to convey the water rights 81-3548, -3544, -3542, -1127, -3547, and -174 to Washington County Water Conservancy District once the project has been purchased, if the applicant, after appropriate compliance with its bylaws, agrees to amend the purchase agreement. This is staff's report.
Thank you, Todd. Appreciate that. Mr. Thompson, what do you have to add to that?
Well, I would, first I appreciate the report. I want to make some suggestions, maybe slightly different than the report. First, we've been approached, obviously we're the biggest shareholder in that company right now. We were approached by them because of the concern with the growth and the movement of ag out of the system, that we more accurately reflect where those water rights are being used, which is for the most part moving very rapidly towards municipal use. When we start getting into getting the deal done, we realized that, and I was integrally involved with getting the loan for piping that canal, that the water rights had never been collateralized with the state. So I called up, I think I called up Barry, who could talk to him about it first. And the reason we were looking at it is because they were going to deed the water rights to the district. They would continue to pay the loan, then we're going to give them a water service contract back. And what they didn't use, we would use within the district system. Okay. When we got into it, realized there was an obligation to deed the water rights, and for one reason or another that slipped through the crack. We obviously did not want to get in an adverse position to water resources. We've been a great partner to the Canal Company, and so trying to figure out how to accommodate all of this and realizing, I think technically it has security. I think there's limited water right, by the way, that goes with that. And I don't recall the number, but I know that there's another big water right that's not on that list. But I'll get that with you.
Yeah, I believe that was added. It's 81-3548.
Is it for about 52nd foot?
Yeah. 56.
Okay, well,
yes, 56.
I called up Tom and told him the first draft I saw didn't have it on. So
It does now.
anyway, well, Canal, we think it'd be better is to have the company deed the water right to us. We will deed it back to the water resources, and then when it's paid off, it would come back to the district, not back to the company, assuming we can get all the shareholder approvals and the contracts in appropriate shape. I think your loan's pretty secure because we're not about to let that default, nor with the cities that we've gone with. So I think we're going to make sure he's taken care of one way or the other.
So rather than the company conveying the water rights to the Board of Water Resources, you prefer that the company convey the water rights to Washington County Water Conservancy, and then Washington, excuse me, Washington County Conservancy District conveys them to the
That's right.
Division of Water
And
Rights.
when it paid off, they would come back to the water district, unless for some reason the
Sure.
contract's not existing.
Sure, sure.
I think it gets the same thing done, but it makes it so 15 or 20 years down the road, when this is all wrapped up, we don't have to worry who was here at the time. There should be a contract that reflects what ought to happen.
Sure, sure.
And Mr. Chairman, we've spoken with Norm Johnson, our attorney, and Norm says this arrangement is fine with him.
Okay.
So I have one comment. So the comment that
Yes,
you
Todd.
mentioned, Ron, is the wording that you said is in the actual report, but the board's motion doesn't necessarily need to specify that the company
Right.
transfers it to district and then
Well,
to us.
I got the impression Tom couldn't get, I talked to Eric about that earlier, and I didn't know if we got that in the report.
Yeah,
so
the
I
wording
thought-
is in the report, it's just
Okay.
not in the motion itself.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So that this language that is printed here will adequately fit what
Yes, we
Mr.
believe so.
Thompson is requesting?
Correct.
Yeah, it's right here. The applicant will convey title to Washington County, which will then convey it to the board.
Okay. All right.
We have a revised report as of the last couple of days.
Okay.
Oh, thank you.
Let him read it first.
Any questions from the board for Mr. Ron Thompson or
Right there.
staff?
Are we going with this wording then?
Yes, I
Are you
think so.
comfortable with that wording on the back page there, Ron? It's in the back page, second to the bottom paragraph,
The underline.
underlined.
Well, it's in the paragraph right above that,
Yeah.
right in the middle, it starts out, accordingly, the applicant will convey title to Washington County Water Conservancy District, which will then convey title to the board.
I'm fine with that.
That explains it in normal terms.
Yeah.
That sentence in the lower part of the paragraph above. So, Mr. Jim Lemon.
All right. I would recommend then that the board allow staff to amend the purchase agreement to convey the water rights 81-3548-3544-1127-3547 and 174 to Washington County Water Conservancy District once the project has been purchased. The applicant, after appropriate compliance with his bylaws, agrees to amend the purchase agreement.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
Mr. Steve Farrell seconds the motion. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Brought good weather, and I hope this sandstorm
I don't know. Might get blown all the way back up to the other end of the state.
As long as it's a rainstorm following you, we're okay.
Sounds good. Thank you, Ron. Next agenda item is L578, Grantsville City Withdrawal. And I will turn to Juliet Tennant for a motion on that item.
All right, well, you got the information here, and if we have any questions for Jacqueline, we can ask them. But I would move to approve that project L578, which is the Grantsville City project that we looked at several months ago, that project be withdrawn from further consideration by the board.
Juliet Tennant has made a motion. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Mr. Kyle Stevens seconds the motion. Any question or discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed to the motion? Motion carries. Thank you, JT. All right. Our next agenda item is the Lake Powell Pipeline Report, and we will turn to Mr. Joel Williams for his presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Happy to give the board an update on the Lake Powell Pipeline project. A little bit frustrated because we were moving right along. Things were happening quickly. FERC made that, issued the ready for environmental analysis, and then kind of the brakes were put on when they said, oh, and we don't know if we have jurisdiction or not. And as a team, we decided we got to get that resolved, and so we asked them to stop the process while they make that decision, and we thought that would likely happen in February at the 15th FERC meeting, the FERC Commission meeting. And when we met just before then in early February, that was my update to the board at that time, was we're hoping, we're waiting to see if we're on the agenda, and we ended up not being on that agenda for the 15th of February. And we said, well, then it'll be March 15th, I guess. And that agenda came and went without our project being discussed. And so we're feeling like things are on hold a little bit as far as the EIS being able to proceed and the timeline that we'd hoped being able to proceed. And the inside information we're getting from those with contact with the FERC Commission is that they are still trying to make their decision on this, and we are left waiting. So that's the position we're in. There are other things moving forward, coordination with other project stakeholders, continuing to meet with National Park Service and Reclamation, Fish and Wildlife, BLM, dealing with other sideline issues that making sure they have the information they need as we prepare for this EIS to come out. We hope soon, after this issue is resolved with jurisdiction. Another item that I thought I'd mention is the Executive Water Finance Board being in town for meetings tomorrow and Friday. They have been holding their meetings typically up at the Capitol, and as they showed a particular interest in the Lake Powell Pipeline project, an invitation was made, I believe, by Ron Thompson in the Water Conservancy District to come down to St. George and have an in-depth discussion on the project. And so that's been scheduled for Friday from 9 to 3. And in addition to that, the Executive Water Finance Board thought it might be good to hear from the public, and has scheduled a meeting on Thursday evening at Dixie High School from 6 to 8. Where they hope to kind of field additional comments from the public about the project. So those two meetings will be coming up. We'll be interested to see how those go, and interested to learn from shareholders and their comments, and also hope to be able to educate a little bit questions that some might have that we can respond to. So that's an update I've got. I guess I could mention as well that tomorrow at 2 o'clock will be the Lake Powell Pipeline Management Committee meeting that we hold every 6 months, as the Lake Powell the management committee gets together to just kind of discuss the project update and the financial report and things like that. So I don't know if there's any other questions from the board at this time.
Any questions from the board for Joel? I guess not, Joel.
Okay.
Appreciate the report.
Thank you.
Wish you had better news.
Yeah, me too.
Anyway. Okay. Our next agenda item is a water conservation report from Mr. Rick Webster. And I think I should nominate Rick for the best dressed in the room.
I didn't get the memo. Yeah, so not what I'm used to wearing, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I've been tasked today with giving you an update on more water education than water conservation. We do several things throughout at Water Resources. We have educational materials, we do classroom interactions, we support water fairs, and we have what we call the Young Artist Water Education Poster Contest. Our educational materials are the best we have to offer is a 24-page activity book written specifically for 4th graders, written on their reading level so that they understand the terminology and the vocabulary. This year we mailed out over 18,000 of them. That means that over 1/3 of the 4th grade students in Utah are reading and using this activity book that teaches them about all things water in Utah. Our classroom interactions, so far this year we've had 25 classroom presentations done directly to the classrooms. It's roughly 750 students. We contract with the Loveland Living Planet Aquarium to do their outreach. It's called the Utah Waters Van. And they hit last year 52,000 4th grade students, which is 100%. So through our contacts and through the staff's activities, we are reaching all the 4th grade students in Utah. We reach 4th grade students because water is taught there, and it's easier to get for the students to make a connection to abstract ideas if they have some understanding of what's going on in the classroom. Currently, we are supporting 5 regional water fairs throughout the state, and in those water fairs, we will see about 10,000 4th grade students. Now, the crown jewel is our poster contest. It's been running for 33 years. Every 4th grade student in the state is invited to participate. We divide the state up into the 11 hydrologic basins, and our 2018 theme is I Am Water. The theme was chosen by the AWWA Water Week committee. The AWWA Intermountain section supports Water Week, which is the first full week in May, and they help us come up with the theme. Some of the winners were chosen last week. So for the Bear River Basin, this is Carissa Mackley from 3 Mile Creek Elementary School. These are all 4th graders. I've been doing this long enough not to second guess what I think might be an adult doing it, and you'll see what I mean later on. From the Weber River Basin, Audrey Bauer from East Layton Elementary. From the Jordan River Basin, Ben Banner from Southland Elementary. It's interesting to see what a 4th grader takes to be I Am Water. Then in Utah Lake, Roxy Stevenson. You can't see very well, but it actually has a little poem that talks about I Am Water. Uinta Basin from Athenian Academy, Allie Carlson. In the West Desert in Stansbury Park Elementary is Izzy Johnson. From the Sevier River Basin, Annabelle Fryer from Spring City Elementary. The West Colorado River Basin is Tyson Johnson from Huntington Elementary. And from Blanding Elementary in the Southeast Colorado River Basin, Kenzie Flannery. From the Cedar Beaver Basin, Cooper Anderson at Iron Springs Elementary. And from the Canal Virgin River Basin, Giovanni Hernandez from Washington Elementary. Now, the main reason I'm here is to personally invite you. We have an awards banquet on May 5th, and we'll be sending out invitations next week. At the Loveland Living Planet Aquarium, we will honor these winners, their teachers, and their families at the aquarium. It's a wonderful event. We would like to have you come and interact with these students and see the passion that they have for the art that they have created. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Rick? I have a comment. Since it's been my privilege to sit on this board, I've been to every one of those programs at the Living Planet Aquarium, and I don't keep going back to see the fish, but these kids are really fantastic, and it's just really enjoyable, especially when I was a 4th grader. I still have no art talent at all, but so, anyway, and Rick really puts on a great program there, and it's just amazing, and I'm always amazed when the contestant from Blanding makes it all the way up there to the to the program. So I really appreciate what Norm goes through watching those kids. It's almost like having one from Grouse Creek in Box Elder County.
We're waiting for that poster.
Yes. Ron?
I just thought, going along with this effort, which I think the state does a great job with water education, I don't know if we're the very first district to do that. We've been doing it for over 25 years and have had over 50,000 kids go through that water education program. We work with the college and then bus the kids in there for two days worth of education activities. I'd also say while you're here and you want to look, it would be worth your time to go visit our desert garden. Last year we had over 65,000 visitors, and we're way ahead of that pace this year. Then we have another garden, the Botanical Garden, that is a different thing, but also is conservation oriented, which would be worth your effort. And the last, I probably need to get in Eric's hand, but as we talk conservation, I've always envisioned water resources as a multi-pronged organization. Not only do you plan, but you help build projects and you have a lot of conservation. I think sometimes we run the risk of being short-sighted. If you follow the Cape Town disaster, you'll know that they decided they could meet all the water needs with conservation. They're within probably 60 days of being completely out of water. They're rationing it to the point they shut off water to the homes and you have to take your buckets to a central distribution point. That's a community that really prided themselves on a conservation agenda to solve all the problems and only have one source of water. In Utah, we've all tried to have multiple sources. That's a little more difficult when you're down in southwest Utah, but it really demonstrates the importance of a balanced water development program, conservation, developing new projects, and maintaining the projects you have. And I would hate to see us lose sight of that. There's certainly an element that thinks you can conserve your way into prosperity. I submit that's not economically or realistic. I noticed some articles just recently that California put that catch-up press on 2 years worth of conservation. Most of those efforts have fallen the wayside with one good year. So, you have to have a balanced program. So I certainly appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate probably, because I'm more on the want to diversify the water resource, the great planning effort that water resource provided to the state. And I think we'll continue to do in the future. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. And
Fourth grade
Yes.
pamphlet you've got, is that available online?
It is. It's available online, and we make it available free of charge. I send out a flyer at the beginning of the school year. They go online and order it, and then we ship it to them. So it's they actually see it, get it in their hands, and decide if they want to use it.
We could look at it. Though,
You
download
absolutely,
it
yes,
online or
yes. There's a PDF on the very front page.
yeah, my only regret is, Rick, is now I've seen the posters. Now I'm be less enticed to go to the banquet.
I know.
I know.
That's why I'm here. Enticing.
You're supposed to tease me, not.
Hey, I dressed up. I
not
normally don't do
satisfy
this.
You didn't want that 7-course meal.
You should get to visit with the kids when you go.
Oh yeah, that's the fun part.
So cute.
It's amazing, those young minds. So anyway,
Thank you for your
anything
time.
else for Rick? Okay, thank you, Rick. Okay, director's report.
Okay.
Mr. Mellis.
Just real quick, and I want to acknowledge and echo things that have been said about Rick and this banquet. And Rick does a wonderful job. He talks about the kids having a lot of good energy. Rick has got a lot of enthusiasm and energy for this program and does a great job. And his wife Jen helps him an awful lot with that banquet too, and makes that a huge success and a really nice event. So last week, Todd Adams and Norm Johnson and I traveled to D.C. to go to the Western States Water Council meetings. There was also the Interstate Council on Water Policy there, and so it was a 3-day, 2.5 day anyway. You go into the evenings, it could have been the whole week, but it was a great discussion on planning and what the agencies are doing to be helpful to the western states. And there's an organization actually called WestFast, the Western States Federal Agency Support Team, that we met with Friday morning, and it was just interesting and good to be in the room with important people from these agencies who spoke pretty passionately also about the things that they're trying to do to be helpful to the West. And some of the comments that came from Brenda Berman, our current Bureau of Reclamation Commissioner, stood out to me, where she talked about infrastructure and the need to build and to repair and replace, and especially reservoirs. And we talked with her about that, said, we agree, we're 100% with you on that idea, because as we look at this, the climate change scenarios that Brian McInerney talked about some yesterday, and how things could be going, it seems like storage, whether it's above ground or whether it's below ground, would be very helpful to us. So it was good to be there, good to hear the things that they were saying, and also especially to hear from Commissioner Berman on her vision for how things ought to go. Just one more item, and I think it's been mentioned before, but I'll just reiterate it again, that we've been working with a group of people from the governor's office as well as the legislature to get, and others in the water community, to get together the request for proposal for the regional water conservation goals, and think that that is a very important next step in this improving and being able to help affect water conservation and better understand our water numbers and our potential, and make that all work together. And so that request for proposals should be going out soon, and we'd be able to, within the next 6 months, I believe, be able to see some good progress on getting those goals together and go from there. So there's a lot of good positive things that are going on. It was good to hear that the precipitation, the water supply, although it's still not very good, is getting better, and maybe we are due for a little bit wetter period here through the next little while, which would be really good. So, Mr. Chairman, that's my report.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate that very much. So any other business that needs to come before this institution? If not, I'd just like in closing to say I'm grateful to all of you who participated both in preparing or presenting in the workshop that we've just enjoyed attending, and to echo what Ron just said, one of the best stories I've heard was Monday evening at dinner, and the Cape Town story that Eric and Ron told us there, and how important that our organization be a multifaceted institution and not just focused on one thing. So anyway, appreciate you all, and with that, I'll ask for a motion for adjournment.
I'd make a motion, we adjourn.
I second it.
It's motioned, and as my friend Dee Hansen would say, it's non-debatable. Motion's adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
All right.